Comics have seen better days. That's just a fact. And within the world of Western comics, Marvel and DC have held the lion's share of sales for decades at this point. This only makes third-party success stories even more impressive. Ninja Turtles, Spawn, and today's subject, Invincible. With a hit Amazon Prime streaming show and even a fighting game, it's safe to say Robert Kirkman's superhero comic is a success. So, with all the hype around the series, I became curious about the original comics, and now that I've read them, I want to share my 2 cents. Is Invincible's success warranted, or is Kirkman just riding off the goodwill from The Walking Dead? Let's talk about it, but first, some housekeeping. This review is going to be split up in 3 parts. Part 1 is going to be just an overview of the early sections of the story, so if you're all caught up with the show up to the Season 3 finale, you're all good. And even if you don't know anything about this series, I'm going to make sure to give a warning before I discuss the heavy stuff. The later story arcs that the show hasn't adapted yet will be covered in parts 2 and 3. Alright? Alright. First, the premise. This is a world where superheroes are commonplace. The greatest hero on Earth is Omni-Man, a superpowered alien from the planet Viltrum who is secretly the writer Nolan Grayson, with a wife, Debbie, and a teenage son, Mark. One day, Mark develops powers similar to his father's and eagerly becomes a superhero in his own right, Invincible. We follow his adventures as he comes into his own as a hero, fights all kinds of strange villains, and makes deeply unsettling discoveries about the people around him. Right off the bat, Invincible doesn't even try to hide how referential it is. Omni-Man's obviously supposed to be Superman, the Guardians of the Globe are a Justice League stand-in, and Mark's favorite comic is Science Dog, which is an obvious reference to Alan Moore's Tom Strong comics. Except in the show he's called Seance Dog and is instead a Doctor Strange knockoff because... I don't know, actually. Maybe Amazon just told Kirkman nobody knew what the hell a Tom Strong was. Anyway, the on-the-nose references might have been a problem, except for the fact Kirkman knows to add his own spin on the characters. These aren't just cheap member berries, they're fully formed characters in their own right. For instance, Omni-Man has facial hair, and as the Joss Whedon cut of Justice League shows, DC would rather spend millions on CGI than allow Superman to have a mustache. The comic is very aware of superhero tropes and plays around with them in a way not too different from something like Dispatch. This goes beyond characters and world building and even affects the book's very structure. For instance, aside from one notable exception, Invincible Rebirth, you really don't have to read any other books to get what's going on here. Invincible follows the manga formula. You want to know where to start? Invincible #1. That's it. There are references to the larger world of Image Comics, even people like Spawn and Witchblade have cameos, but that's all they are, blink and you'll miss it appearances that are just there for fan service. This feels like it was made by a nerd who's been reading this stuff all his life and has many of the same complaints about it that other hardcore nerds have. That's all well and good, except that you kinda have to sit with the comic for a while to get to that. For the first 10-ish issues, Invincible is very much just your bog-standard teenage superhero comic. I get why Kirkman does this, it's to lull you into a false sense of security only to blindside you with a twist. And just so we're clear, the twist is awesome. But it doesn't make the early issues any more interesting. I think it's why they hinted that something big was coming in the very first episode of the show. It's like Kirkman realized, oh damn, I need to let people know this isn't just a generic superhero show. Another thing they anticipated in the show has to do with the supporting cast, namely their development. For the first few arcs, Invincible is laser focused on its title character. 2 problems with that. 1, Mark at this point is just a very basic teenage superhero. You know the drill. Girl problems, balancing civilian life with superhero work, figuring out what kind of hero he wants to be. Not poorly written or anything, but it's also not mind-blowing stuff. Problem number 2 is that the supporting players feel very underdeveloped. In the early issues, Mark meets Alan the Alien and joins the Teen Team, composed of Adam Eve, Rexplode, Duplicate, and Robot. Oh, by the way, these are all terrible names, just awful names. These all go on to become major players in the story, but when they're first introduced, they barely get any screen time, so they just kind of fall into the background. They only start getting some more development after the big twist. But before getting into the big turning point, I want to talk about the art. The series has two artists throughout the majority of its run, co-creator Cory Walker and Ryan Ottley. Walker's art style is very cartoony and simplistic in the early issues. A bit too much, if I'm being honest. Take the cover for the comic's first issue, for example. The lack of detailed shading just makes the image look pretty flat. Also, the faces just look weird, I'm sorry. To be fair, Walker was literally still in high school when the comic started, and his skills improved greatly over time. I'll talk more about that in parts 2 and 3. Otley comes in at around issue 10 and becomes the series' main artist. His art's a lot more detailed than Walker's and is the one I ultimately associate with Invincible as a whole. We immediately get some pretty intense fight scenes and Otley handles himself admirably, giving the fights the large-scale feeling they deserve, and like Walker, he also noticeably improves over time. One problem I have with the art in general for the early stretch of the series is the frankly lazy reuse of panels. The comic itself even pokes fun at it, but it doesn't make it any better, now does it? It's just a way to cut corners and fill up the page count. Thankfully, they tone it down over time. But let's talk about the twist now. This happens at around issue 10 of the comic or at the end of season 1 of the show. If you really don't know anything at all about Invincible and don't want any spoilers, you've been warned. Okay? 3, 2, 1. Omni-Man has been lying the entire time. The Viltrumites are not peaceful explorers. They're a race of ruthless conquerors who wiped out their own weak and spread across the universe, subjugating entire planets. Nolan wasn't protecting Earth out of the kindness of his heart, but because he had to prepare the planet for takeover, earn our trust, and make it easier for us to submit. He murders the Guardians of the Globe so they won't oppose him, and gives Mark the "you and I can rule the galaxy together" speech Vader gave Luke at the end of Empire Strikes Back. Invincible rejects the offer, obviously, and the result is one of the most brutal father-son fights in superhero comics. Omni-Man genuinely believes humanity is weak, that we'd be better off serving the Viltrumite Empire. Invincible tries to stop him, but he's just completely outmatched. In the end, Nolan leaves Earth, not because he's defeated, but because he can't bring himself to kill his own son. Kirkman, as a writer, is known for his shocking twists, and throughout the entirety of Invincible, I don't think any twist is as well known as this one. People like to cite Omni-Man as an example of the tired trope of "what if Superman was evil?" But I don't think that's fair. Hear me out for a second. He's a member of a superpowered alien race, comes to Earth, marries a human woman, fathers a son with whom he has a complicated relationship, eventually has an identity crisis because he thinks he's gone soft, goes off his rocker and murders a bunch of people, only to realize the error of his ways and join the good guys again. Nolan isn't "what if Superman was evil," he's "what if Superman was Vegeta?" Tell me you don't see it. After I lay it out like this, tell me you don't see it. And considering Prince Vegeta is literally the greatest fictional character ever created, I think the comic deserves some credit. So yeah, the twist is great, and Nolan is probably my favorite character from the first third of the story. After he leaves Earth, we spend a while just with the aftermath of it all. We meet Cecil Stedman, basically Amanda Waller, except, a white male, and he takes Mark under his wing as a sort of shady mentor. Cecil is extremely utilitarian, whereas Mark is very idealistic, and in theory, this would lead to a lot of interesting arguments between the two. In practice, though, it's not that great. Cecil will usually make a cold yet logical case for his actions. Invincible will basically respond by gasping and saying, "How could you?" It's weird. The way it's portrayed, Mark just comes off overly naive. Once his dad turned out to be a bit of a psycho, it would have made sense for him to learn to not blindly trust people, much less shady government agents. I mean, for Christ's sake, Mark, these people killed JFK. It also doesn't help that Cecil keeps being proven right and Mark keeps flip-flopping on his beliefs. More on that in part 2. Around this time, Mark also gets his first love interest, Amber, and this is one of the most surprisingly strong elements of the comic. Invincible is very aware of how bad superhero romances can get. Some books turn into full-blown soap operas, screaming, crying, cheating, like a cheap Mexican telenovela where everyone just happens to be wearing spandex. Amber avoids all of that. We get a bit of the usual at first. Mark misses dates because he's busy fighting crime. You think you know where this is going. The usual stupid song and dance of, if I tell my loved ones I'm a superhero, they'll be in danger somehow. Except, no. Mark eventually decides to just tell Amber he's invincible, and while she is shocked, she also tries her best to be understanding. They eventually do break up, but in the most mature way possible. It's not because of contrived drama, but because their lives are just incompatible. Nobody's the villain here, they just want different things. There was this whole controversy when the show came out about Amber and how she was portrayed, with a lot of people calling her unreasonable and poorly written. I've only seen a few episodes of the show, but having now read the comic, I know for a fact they screwed her up in the adaptation. There is no way anybody would look at a comics accurate version of Amber and call her unreasonable. In fact, I'll come right out and say it. She's one of the best superhero love interests ever, a true highlight of the comic. Aside from that, during Mark's tenure working for Cecil, we finally get some more development for the secondary characters, and we learn the team's backstory. I appreciate that the comic isn't lazy and actually gives them different origins, such as Eve's being more science-based and Kate's being more mystical. I mean, I couldn't bring myself to care about either Kate or Rex at all, but it's a step up from, literally nothing. The comic really does hit its stride during this whole section. I was trying to read about 2 issues per sitting, but when I hit this part of the story, I was easily burning through like 4 or 5 a day. I really enjoyed it, especially since it feels like Invincible is coming into his own as a hero, even getting his own arch-nemesis, Angstrom Levy, a guy who can open portals to other universes. One day, Mark interferes with his plans and leaves him permanently deformed. From then on, Levy swears to ruin Mark's life. We also get more development on the space side of things. Alan the alien comes back to Earth, and Mark learns there's this whole coalition of planets thing out there. They're the largest group opposing the Viltrum Empire, and they're also basically the Federation from Star Trek, complete with a dollar store version of the TNG crew. Okay? Anyway, Mark eventually gets summoned by Science Dog and travels to where his dad is. Turns out, Nolan's been living his best life as the emperor of an alien planet and macking on some bug chicks. So, now Invincible has a baby brother, Oliver, who, thanks to his alien biology, ages much faster. But before Mark and Oliver can fight over who gets to play Diddy in Donkey Kong Country, some Viltrumites show up and try to arrest Nolan for failing to take over Earth. He's not having that, and so father and son team up to fight the Viltrumites and protect the natives. This is the first step in Nolan's redemption arc, as he's clearly not blindly loyal to the Empire anymore and resents them for killing the people on that planet. At the end of the battle, Nolan gets taken prisoner and Mark is given an ultimatum. Take over Earth, or someone worse will be sent in to do it for him. Back on Earth, Invincible and Eve start dating, and the comic becomes weirdly horny. Just to be clear, I'm not a prude, okay? I'm 100% fine with fan service. You want to give me some attractive people to look at? Go right ahead. I'm not complaining about the characters being hot, I'm complaining that the comic apparently thinks just having the couples make out constitutes humor. Like, more than once we'll have a joke that's basically just, oh man, these two are totally going at it, huh? Like, they're really macking on each other right now, like they're so loud, it's so intense, oh boy. In a comic with aliens, talking dogs, and a supervillain group called the Lizard League, this somehow stands out as just juvenile. I also think maybe this is because Kirkman doesn't really know how to show Mark and Eve are in love, so he figures just having the two of them bump and grind all the time is good enough. The relationship as a whole isn't bad, but this does feel a bit weird. Regardless, we get a bunch of cool arcs in this part. Mark tries to teach Oliver how to be a superhero, we deal with an alien invasion, Angstrom Levy shows up again and again to threaten Mark's family. Kirkman has some fun just doing some side quests for a while, establishing this world and the people in it. Oliver is actually an interesting character in his own right. He's not a dumb kid's sidekick. His superhero name, Kid Omni-Man, is so mind-numbingly stupid that I think it loops back around to being cool. Like Cecil, he has a pretty utilitarian view on things. He straight up kills his enemies and feels no remorse doing it. Mark will usually quote Batman and say, "If you kill a murderer, the number of murderers in the world stays the same." To which Oliver will usually reply with, "Yeah, that's why I don't stop at 1. Anyway, Levy keeps coming back and murdering people, including launching an all-out invasion of evil Invincibles from other universes to destroy Earth. A bunch of people die, one of the marks has a stupid mohawk, and eventually Prime Invincible traps his copies and Levy in an alternate reality. But good heavens, would you look at the time. Remember how the Viltrumites gave Mark a deadline to take over Earth? Well, he didn't do it, so now they sent in somebody who will. Conquest, the biggest, baddest soldier in the Viltrum Empire. I appreciate how exhausting this whole thing feels for the characters. Like the story just keeps throwing one potential world-ending event after the other, with the alien invasion, Levy's attack, and now Conquest. Great sense of escalation. If Omni-Man was Vegeta, Conquest is Broly, a walking apocalypse of a man who exists purely to fight. The battle between Invincible and Conquest is absolutely savage, and the tension comes from genuinely wondering if major characters are about to die. Eventually, Invincible gets pissed off, forgets about the whole no-kill rule thing, and caves Conquest's face in, leading to a brutally satisfying victory. At the end, Mark reunites with Eve, who can apparently rebuild herself when she's near death, but the process leaves her completely naked. For some reason. Hey, I'm not complaining. So yeah, at this point, the threat of the Viltrumites can't be ignored anymore. Mark and the gang have to team up with the coalition of planets to take these dollar store Saiyans down. At the same time, Alan the alien gets captured by the Viltrumites and ends up being cellmates with, you guessed it, Nolan, who has re-examined his life and decided that, you know what, screw these guys, I miss my wife back on Earth. The Viltrumite War is coming. But that whole thing is gonna have to wait for part 2 of this review. You may have noticed some stuff is missing. Where's Powerplex? Where's Dragon and Issa? Where's the undisputed best character of the series, Battle Beast? Well, I'll talk about them in the sequel. Gotta have a hook, you know? But for now, I can tell you that, no, Invincible isn't a total fluke. I'd argue becoming a worldwide smash hit always involves at least a little bit of luck, but there's still actual quality in this early section of the comic. Now, does it keep a high level of quality throughout? We're gonna discuss that in part 2. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the second part of this Invincible extravaganza. See you there. Hey, in case you missed it, this is part 2 of my Invincible review. Part 1 covered everything up to the Conquest fight. That'll be in the cards and in the description. So go watch that first, then come back to this video, since I'm going in with the assumption everybody watching knows what happened in the plot so far. Anyway, let's talk about Invincible going cosmic. Nolan joins the coalition of planets and starts hopping across the universe trying to find allies strong enough to stand against the Viltrum Empire. And that gives us some new faces. You got Tech Jacket, basically Iron Man meets Spider-Man. You got Space Racer, a guy whose entire personality boils down to having a gun that ignores the laws of physics. And then there's Battle Beast, who showed up before but now becomes a more relevant character. His backstory is that he fought off an alien invasion on his home planet, got a taste for it, and then said, okay, guess I'm fighting until I die then. I love this guy. I love the design, I love the whole Klingon mentality, just awesome. Maybe my favorite character in the entire series. Now, sure, all this Star Trekking is partly to raise the stakes, but I'm also convinced it's because Ryan Ottley is just damn good at drawing aliens. I already praised his art in part 1, but I really have to gush about it some more here. Incredible fight scenes, super detailed alien planets, gorgeous looking backgrounds. Ottley's art hits a new peak during the Conquest fight and stays at a 10 out of 10 level for the entire rest of the series. Cory Walker also comes back occasionally, and there's a noticeable upgrade in the quality of his artwork. Again, the dude was in high school when this comic started, so it's only natural that his art would evolve over time. It's not my favorite art style ever, some faces do look pretty weird, but it's still a marked improvement. I'm also happy to say that the comic tones down the reuse of panels when we hit this stretch of the story, thank God. We also get more full-page and even two-page spreads, which just helps sell the increased stakes the plot's going for. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Mark's in a very different headspace. He's rebuilding the planet after the Conquest fight and starting to question his no-kill rule. You can almost hear him thinking, screw Batman, Punisher's my guy now, and whether you agree with that or not, he goes too far. During an alien invasion, he kills the human host of these parasites without even realizing the guy was completely innocent. It's messy, it's reckless, and it gets bad enough that Cecil, the deep state war crimes guy, has to tell him to take a chill pill. And here we hit a problem I have with the writing. Invincible is a very reactive character for a lot of the series. Killing Conquest wasn't a calculated move, he did it in the heat of battle. Previously, he was all in on the whole no-killing rhetoric, but now it feels like he did a total 180, and the comic doesn't do enough to justify it. Later, Mark ends up in a sort of reasonable middle ground position where he will kill, but only if it's necessary, and it would have made more sense for him to skip straight to that instead of cosplaying Frank Castle for a couple of issues. Anyway, Nolan returns to Earth for the first time in years and has an awkward reunion with his wife, Debbie. And by awkward, I mean she absolutely unloads on him. As she should, right? I mean, this man lied to her for their entire marriage, he killed several innocent people, he nearly murdered their son. There is no universe where she just shrugs that off. Yeah, they get back together, and look, I understand redemption arcs, Nolan's trying, he's clearly a changed man and regrets what he did, but part of me feels like losing Debbie permanently would have hit harder. It would have made the consequences feel real instead of negotiable. Around this time, we also get a deeper dive into Viltrumite history. Turns out, building your society on might makes right and purging the weak doesn't do wonders for long-term population growth. Besides that, there was also the Scourge virus, a bioweapon engineered by a rogue Viltrumite named Thetis who looked around and basically asked,
"Are we the baddies?"
So now there are fewer than 50 pure-blooded Viltrumites left, which brings us to one of the smarter bits of writing in this arc. The Empire wasn't just looking for military allies, they were looking for genetic compatibility. The Viltrumites need to repopulate ASAP, and as it turns out, humans are the most compatible species they have ever found. And this is where I have to glaze the comic for a bit. Aliens who look like humans is such a common sci-fi trope that most audiences won't even blink at seeing it. Usually it's down to either lazy design or budget limitations, but here, it's plot relevant, it's intentional. The Viltrum Empire specifically sought out species that were genetically similar to them for the sake of reproduction, and that's why Earth matters so much to them. That's just good writing, well done. Now, for something called the Viltrumite War, it's kind of funny how little war we actually see in Invincible itself. One issue it kicks off, 3 issues later it's been months. I'm sure the tie-ins give more context, but still, in the main book itself, it feels like you're hearing about the war more than seeing it. We get a rematch between Mark and Conquest. Turns out, Cecil had kept him alive the last time and he escaped, because I guess even Cecil can't be right about everything. I don't fully get the point of this rematch, but my best guess is it's to show Mark's first win wasn't a fluke, he's legit growing stronger. In any case, he wins for good this time, but gets knocked out of commission for several weeks. Things come to a head when the rebel Viltrumites lead a frontal assault on the Empire, complete with our heroes literally flying through Viltrum's core and destroying the planet completely. It's some straight up Dragon Ball Z stuff, and I love it. You know who doesn't love it? Grand Regent Thrag, the current head of the Viltrum Empire and part-time Freddie Mercury impersonator. I'm gonna spoil this right now, but Thrag ends up being the big bad of the series, death on 2 legs, and he's none too pleased about having his planet blown up, so he straight up kills Thetis and gives the father-son duo one hell of a beatdown. He doesn't kill them though, and it's implied he has a special reason for doing so. When Mark wakes up, we get some new developments. The good news is Alan's now the new leader of the coalition. The less good news is the Viltrumites have all gone to Earth. Thrag has a back chat with our heroes. The fact is the Empire is almost extinct. If they went to war, they would probably lose, but they would definitely destroy Earth, and so everybody agrees to a truce. And here we have something I like about Thrag. Despite being Mr. Bad Guy, he's actually a well-established character with clearly defined goals. A lot of stories either make their villains boring old fuddy-duddies who only exist so the lead has somebody to fight, or they try too hard to make them relatable and end up sweeping all the bad stuff they did under the rug. Thrag doesn't fall into either camp. He's super conceited, thinking he was made in heaven or something, doesn't feel any remorse over what he did, but understands that his top priority at this point should be the survival of his species, so he's willing to set aside all the killing and conquering. For a while afterwards, the comic just has Invincible checking up on everybody. Eve's chunkier now, and Mark can't stop salivating, the pervy bastard. We also find out she was pregnant when he left, but terminated the pregnancy because she didn't feel ready to raise a child alone. This is an example of the comic trying to cover touchier subjects, and I'd say that whether you agree with Eve's decision or not, the whole thing was handled tastefully. This time. Moving on, the first big development comes when a villain called Dinosaurus blows up Las Vegas, turning it into a massive sheet of glass. During their fight, Red Yoshi over here makes some decent points that give Mark pause. He starts to wonder if maybe there isn't a better way of dealing with these bad guys than just punching them out. But before we can develop that, Mark has to deal with the most annoying character in the series, Powerplex. Yeah, I said it, this guy sucks. Powerplex is a guy whose sister died during the Invincible vs. Omni-Man fight and blames Mark for what happened. He gives himself powers, ropes his wife and child into his whacked-out revenge scheme, and gets them killed, because he doesn't understand electrical conductivity. He's supposed to represent the civilian perspective, the collateral damage, the human cost of these larger-than-life battles. Great premise for a character. The problem is he's just, completely wrong about everything. His hatred is built on misinformation, his tragedy is largely self-inflicted, it doesn't feel like he's rightfully calling Mark out on his BS, it feels like he's just looking for a reason to hate.
You can't keep getting away with it!
And when he finally realizes that, it's not cathartic, it's just like, okay, so why did we spend so much time on you? Moving on, Mark starts to reflect on the whole superhero thing and decides that Cecil had a point all this time. Shame it took him several months to reach that conclusion, but oh well. He helps this fan service alien girl get the energy she needs to help the people on her planet, and also decides to break Dinosaurus out of prison. He thinks he can steer Dino Man in the right direction, helping people without committing actual terrorism. This is an interesting choice for Mark, and it tells us something about his character, namely that he's getting tired of fighting the same old bad guys over and over again. Helping the girl's objectively the right move, so let's see if he's also right about Earl Sinclair. Back in space, Alan gets his hands on the Scourge virus and decides to just use it on the remaining Viltrumites, even though that could potentially wipe out humanity as well. Oliver says go for it, the mad bastard, but Mark is appalled by this, and my knee-jerk reaction is to call BS on him taking the moral high ground after breaking a literal eco-terrorist out of prison, but I can concede that a potential 2-for-1 deal on genocide is worse than anything Dinosaurus ever did. Anyway, everybody fights and Invincible gets infected with the virus, with none other than Thrag volunteering to cure him from his sheer heart attack. He takes the opportunity to examine Mark's DNA and confirms something he already suspected. We spent some time with Robot and Monster Girl, aka Rex and Amanda. They got trapped in another dimension, lived there for centuries, but only aged a few months. They got married, overthrew an alien regime, Rex became kind of a dictator, they broke up, got back together, fought another war, and finally returned to Earth after making peace on the alternate world. Robot and Monster Girl's relationship is one of the most well-done dramatic stories of the series. Feels almost like Anakin and Padme in a way. Those two are genuinely in love, but the choices they make and the paths they take in life mean the relationship is just never gonna work. More on that in part 3. Meanwhile, Dinosaurus finally takes down the greatest menace to civilized society, Greenland. Yeah, at this point, Mark realizes he might have made a bit of an oopsie freeing a literal mass murderer and just kills him. And here's the thing, Dinosaurus has a completely innocent human alter ego. Cecil's solution? Keep him in human form, in prison. Mark's solution? Kill both. Yeah, Dinosaurus asked Mark to do it, but he doesn't speak for his human side now, does he? I get that growing up means making mistakes, but this is the second time Mark swings wildly from one extreme to the other. First it was the killing thing, now this. He went from Cecil's a monster for working with former villains to looking at Dinosaurus and saying, I can fix him. Having Mark flip-flop between two polar opposite positions makes it feel like he doesn't have a solid moral framework. He's supposed to be growing as a person and thinking more clearly about this whole superhero thing, but it feels like he's just operating based on vibes here. And then we hit what I genuinely think is the weakest stretch in the entire series. Remember Thrag? He's upset because the Viltrumites are getting a little too human for his taste. Also, the Great King Rat fears for his throne. Remember, his title is Grand Regent, not Emperor. The royal bloodline was thought lost centuries ago, and he's technically just keeping the seat warm until the rightful heirs show up. Not that they will, right? I mean, come on, less than 50 Viltrumites left? What are the odds that one of them just happens to be a direct descendant of the Emperor? That'd be almost as far-fetched as the descendant being the one living, pure-blooded Viltrumite who turned against the Empire. So yeah, Nolan's the descendant. Man, ain't that convenient? Also, remember how it was implied the Grand Regent spared Nolan and Mark because he knew about their lineage, which would imply he was okay with them taking over? I guess he changed his mind and said, I want it all. Thrag tries to kill Nolan, but not before telepathically telling him about his bloodline. Yeah, Nolan wasn't aware of it, nobody else besides Thrag was, and he still decided to tell him the news of the world, when he knew other Viltrumites might overhear him. Lo and behold, they do. And the same Viltrumite who wanted to kill Nolan like 3 months ago now instantly switched sides. Man, ain't that convenient? Yeah, I'm not gonna beat around the bush. I hate this. Before, the whole Viltrumite conflict was about ideology, domination versus integration. But adding this element of a secret royal bloodline takes away from that. It would have been way more impactful if Nolan managed to become the new leader by simply talking sense into the other guys. But now, it feels like he mostly got the job because of dumb luck. And speaking of dumb, so Nolan's the new emperor and Thrag is officially in the death cell. This is an incredibly powerful, incredibly dangerous Viltrumite who despises Nolan and his entire bloodline. What does the new emperor do? Lets him go. Not executed, not imprisoned, not even monitored, exiled. He does a whole Jean-Luc Picard speech about how the Viltrumites need to be better, and I can appreciate not wanting to ritualistically beat the guy to death, but you don't even think it's worth it to keep him in prison? Reading it for the first time, I was convinced that Nolan had some secret plan, that letting Thrag go was some 4D chess move I just wasn't seeing. But nope. He sets the obvious villain free because the comic needs a final boss. That's it. Meanwhile, guess who's back? Back again. That's right, it's our favorite broccoli head, Angstrom Levy. He thought Mark died to Dinosaurus earlier and was just living his best life as a normal-ass guy. When he finds out Invincible's still alive, he gets back on his villain BS. He traps Mark in an alternate universe and starts threatening a now-pregnant Eve. Mark ends up trapped in the same place his duplicates got sent to at the end of the invasion and meets up with Mohawk Invincible, who had some experiences I don't feel comfortable showing, let alone describing. Thing is, Eve actually manages to talk some sense into Levy, pointing out that obsessing over revenge literally screwed up his life more than anything Mark ever did. Levy seems to realize she has a point and brings the two Invincibles back, with Mohawk taking the guy to his home dimension. Eve tells Prime Invincible that she managed to talk sense into Levy and asks him to let it go, but he just can't. Robot manages to build a device that allows for multiversal travel, and Mark decides to go, despite Eve's protests. Another bad move. When the two reach the Mohawk-verse, Mohawk Invincible reveals Levy is no longer a threat, now being regularly tortured for his enjoyment and to help conquer other universes. Yeah, at this point, Robot activates his secret weapon, a painful signal that debilitates Viltrumites. He kills everybody in the room except Mark and explains his evil plan. Simply put, Rex wants to fix Earth the same way he fixed the alien dimension he got stranded in. He thought to turn Prime Invincible to his side, but after seeing what an evil edgelord Mohawk was, he decided it just wasn't worth it. Do note that Robot intentionally keeps Prime alive because he doesn't want to kill him, even though that would probably be the most logical choice. This is another example of our lead ignoring the advice of the people closest to him and paying severely for it. But unlike with Dinosaurus, I can actually understand Mark's obsession. Levy is the guy who kept coming back and causing trouble, and I can appreciate that he's protective of Eve and his unborn child. It'd be hard to just take her word for it that, oh no, the guy's totally not coming back this time. I had a 5-minute conversation with him. It's a mistake, yes, but it's an understandable one. Because of his obsessiveness, now Mark's stranded in an evil alternate universe, his pregnant wife is now alone, and one of the most intelligent people he's ever met is en route to his home universe to try and conquer it. And this is where we end part 2 of the video. Invincible tried to go cosmic, it raised the stakes, it expanded the universe, but along the way the story started showing some serious growing pains. The Viltrumite politics feel rushed, characters start making some questionable decisions just to move the plot forward, and Mark is in desperate need of some real character development. So yeah, Invincible ain't a perfect comic, but a lot of stories can still be fondly remembered if they go out with a bang. A great ending makes people forget a lot of bad stuff, but ironically, it's usually the hardest part to write. So next time, we're talking about the comic's final act, the deaths of major characters, and whether Invincible actually nails its ending. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. See you in part 3. Alright, time to see if Invincible actually sticks the landing, or fumbles it right at the finish line. No recap, we're in the endgame now. Mark's stranded in an evil alternate universe, robots on his way to conquer Earth, and somehow things are about to get even messier. So let's not waste any time and jump straight into it. So Mark's stuck in the Mohawk-verse and figures the only way to ensure his safety is to pretend he's Mohawk-vincible. Turns out, this version of him is dating Anissa, a female Viltrumite who had some run-ins with Invincible in the Prime universe as well. The couple rules over Earth with an iron fist. Prime finds out about Mohawk Bot, one of the few people left opposing him. Robot's understandably suspicious, but Mark cooks up a scheme that allows him to transfer his mind into a clone of Prime Vincible, effectively making him Earth's new ruler. Rex might not be the nicest guy ever, but he's a hell of a lot better than Mohawk Vincible. As thanks, Robot builds a portal that lets Prime go back to his own universe. When he arrives, however, Prime Anissa is waiting for him. Despite orders to repopulate, she just doesn't want human men, and so she forces herself onto Mark. Yeah. This is another example of the comic trying to do a touchy subject, but unlike Eve's first pregnancy, this just doesn't work. The way it's presented here makes it feel cheap and exploitative. The bigger problem, this isn't an isolated issue, it's part of a pattern. Take Bulletproof, the second worst character of the series. This guy cheats on his girlfriend, gets a second chance, immediately tries to cheat again with Eve, and then we get this completely unnecessary sequence where his parents die in a brutal, drawn-out scene that adds absolutely nothing to the story. It doesn't develop his character, it doesn't tie into any themes, it barely even gets referenced again. It's just there to shock you. And joking about it afterwards doesn't make it better, it just makes it more obvious. That's the frustrating part, because when the writing's good, it's really good. But moments like this make the comic feel insecure, like it doesn't trust its own storytelling to hold your attention. After all of that, let's talk about something the comic does much better. Robot. Mark tries to warn Cecil of what's going on, but Robot kills him. R.I.P. King, you were right about almost everything. Rex then launches his assault on Earth, unveiling a frankly awesome-looking black armor. He then proceeds to kill several heroes and even tries to kill Monster Girl, the woman he loves, collapsing on the floor crying after sending her out an airlock. This is some great stuff. Robot's fall to the dark side is actually fantastic because it all feels like a natural progression for his character. Not once did I think he was acting out of line with what was previously established. He was always brilliant but lacking in humanity. This is that character flaw taken to the extreme. But he doesn't magically become a totally different character. He's not out here cackling while mowing innocent people down. You can see a quiet resignation in him, like he's just convinced this is what he has to do. He feels no enjoyment in it. It's legit one of the best heel turns I've seen in comic books. Mark tries to fight Robot alongside other heroes led by Immortal and Duplicate. Problem is, despite Rex's methods being horrific, it's impossible to argue with his results. Normal, everyday people lead much happier, safer lives because of what he did. He's a monster, he's despicable, but he actually created something of a utopia. There's even a pretty interesting moment when Invincible and Robot fight and he points out Mark's hypocrisy. Now yes, part of the reason Mark opposes Rex is because of his methods, sure, but like 50% of it is also what he did to Mark personally. Considering the whole Dinosaurus debacle, if the guy hadn't stranded Invincible in the alternate universe, I could see him eventually siding with Robot. Speaking of which, Nolan sides with Robot. The Viltrum Empire's top priority is still repopulation, and it's kinda hard to do that when you're fighting a war. Not being able to fight Robot, but also not being comfortable around him, Mark and Eve decide to leave Earth and move to Telescria, the Coalition homeworld. Invincible had his moral relativism era, now he's in his I just wanna be a dad era, as the birth of his daughter, Terra, happens a little bit before the couple leaves Earth. At the same time, King of Awesomeness Battle Beast tracks down Thrag, who has a plan to defeat Nolan and the Viltrumites. Wow, what a shock, not like I could have seen that coming from a mile away. Specifically, Thrags found himself some fat-bottomed girls and started his very own Viltrumite daycare on the bug planet Nolan was in previously. Anyway, the two guys step up, two of the most powerful, bloodthirsty characters in the series about to have a battle to the death. This should be one of the best fights in the entire series, and yeah, I mean, it's cool. The problem? The comic keeps cutting away from it. Felt like I was watching an early 2000s shonen anime or something. We keep cutting from extremely badass fight scenes to normal, day-in-the-life moments with Mark and Eve just being parents, I guess. Look, Terra's cute, I don't mind that, but the stop-and-start nature of the fight means I could never really get my fill. It's like, damn, I could be watching a lion guy fight a Freddie Mercury Super Saiyan, but instead I'm watching Mark be vaguely racist to Oliver's Bug GF. Oh, so what did you want? Several issues of nothing but Thrag and Battle Beast fighting? Yes! Yes! But at the end of the day, I appreciate that BB got to go out the way he wanted, fighting a powerful enemy to the death. Also, Thrag literally turning Battle Beast into a badass fur cape? Yeah, that's cold. The battle doesn't go unnoticed though, and soon Alan sends Mark and Oliver to search for Thrag. Mark takes the job, but makes it clear he's done taking life or death missions. His top priority is his family, and he doesn't want to risk being separated from them. I'm sure that's gonna work out fine. Arriving on the planet, the brothers don't find Thrag, but Mark does find this weird-looking alien plant thing. As far as I know, this is never explained. Mark gets transported back in time, specifically to when he first got his powers all those years back. He then uses his future knowledge to prevent all the bad stuff that happened in the comic, including Nolan's attempted takeover of Earth. Things are objectively better in this timeline, and yet, Mark's miserable. His daughter doesn't exist, Eve's dating Rex explode, and oh yeah, I guess Oliver got erased or something? Mark doesn't even mention that. He's then given a choice by the freaky alien plant. Go back to his original timeline and erase the one he created, or stay in the perfect timeline while sacrificing his personal happiness. Mark chooses option A. It's hard to call it the correct choice, but it's the one he's comfortable with. This whole reboot arc is one of the most controversial the series ever did, but honestly, I dig it. It's here that Mark realizes something that I had noticed a while ago. He kinda sucks at being a superhero. I'm not calling him a bad person, I'm saying he never accepted the whole sacrificing personal happiness for the greater good thing that's kind of essential for superheroes. Even when he was working with Dinosaurus, it was at least partially so he wouldn't have to keep fighting these people. The fact of the matter is, Mark became a hero for the flimsiest excuse possible. He didn't have a power and responsibility moment, his parents weren't shot in an alleyway, he became invincible because he liked comic books and figured being a superhero would be fun. Turns out, it isn't. It involves sacrifices Mark just isn't comfortable making, and here is when he first acknowledges that fact. It's why I like the reboot arc, despite it being kinda pointless in the larger scheme of things, serving basically as just an excuse to have a 5-year time skip. Tara's now a small child, Eve dated some other guy, and Oliver now has a John Waters mustache. Most importantly, Thrag's babies have now matured into teenagers. He and Oliver have become dear friends in the 5 years Mark was gone. Don't worry though, Oliver is actually a triple agent, pretending to side with Thrag while feeding Alan information. Mark and Eve visit Earth. Nolan's got a handlebar mustache now. Cool. And we find out about Marky, who is Mark's son with Anissa. This is also where the comic tries to give Anissa a redemption arc. Yeah, not gonna lie, that doesn't sit right with me. I really doubt this would have been handled the same way if the genders were reversed, and the whole "she's not that person anymore" angle feels unearned, to say the least. Anyway, Invincible and Adam Eve are kinda done being superheroes and go to a secluded planet where they hope to just raise their daughter in peace. That doesn't last. Thrag invades the planet with his son and daughter. One of them's like a vaguely awkward girl who questions her father's orders, the other's just a total cartoon character, like a snidely Whiplash type of guy whose two favorite hobbies are probably tying women to train tracks and kicking puppies. This is because, in case you needed more confirmation, Mark's not a superhero, and so he just kills the kid and tosses his body at Thrag after Mr. Bad Guy kills Oliver. Yeah, Oliver dies. We're reaching the finale, people. We're gonna get some major character deaths. At this point, there's no more running from it. Thrag isn't going to stop. There's no negotiating, no compromise. They have to take him down. So, we get the Second Viltrumite War. The Coalition liberates planets, and eventually the two armies converge on Earth. Nolan fights the Grand Regent one-on-one, but is just no match for him, getting almost bisected. Mark gets angry and fights the guy on his own, with their fight culminating in the surface of the sun. Legit one of the coolest moments in the series, and more Dragon Ball Z nonsense. During their fight, Thrag confirms the only thing motivating him is revenge. No real long-term plan, no overarching goal, and certainly no honor. He just hates Mark and wants to kill him. The end. He sacrifices his own kids with just a flick of the wrist. The problem is that openly treating your own soldiers like garbage doesn't inspire a lot of loyalty, and so Thrag's daughter orders all her brothers and sisters to stand down. At this point, Mark does a whole speech about how maybe the real Invincible were the friends we made along the way, and another one bites the dust as Thrag finally dies, his body being burnt to cinders on the sun. The Second Viltrumite War is over. Nolan, however, ain't doing too hot. He shares a few last words with his son and passes the throne over to Mark. Nolan's death isn't unexpected, but they do manage to make it emotional and poignant. The finale has this whole theme of Mark coming into his own to become the man he was always meant to be, and having him step up and take over the Empire is the first example of that. At this point, we reach the end of the story, and from my experience, larger stories like this tend to go in one of two directions with their endings. One, the Last Crusade type of ending, where our leads ride off into the sunset, things are intentionally left ambiguous and open-ended. Two, the Return of the King type of ending, where the story explains in great detail everything that happened in the days, months, and even years following our big finale. Invincible goes for the second kind. Terra grows up, Robot becomes a powerless brain in a jar, Marky gets adopted into the family, Eve learns she's practically immortal, Mark dismantles the Coalition and generally becomes a good emperor, knowing when to attempt diplomacy and when to choose war. And in the end, centuries into the future, Mark remembers what his father once asked him during their first fight. What will you have after 500 years? He looks around at his family, his empire, the long-lasting peace he's built, and he smiles. I try to avoid looking at other people's reviews when writing my stuff, just to make sure I don't get influenced by other people's thoughts, but I'm writing this final section after having watched a couple of retrospectives. I kind of feel like I was more negative on Invincible than a lot of people. I've seen more than one person say it's literally like their favorite comic book ever, and yeah, I just can't say the same. Not that I have a problem with people loving this comic, by all means, if you think Invincible's perfect, that's fine, and I can totally see why. Ryan Ottley's art is a consistent highlight of the series, going from extremely competent to downright breathtaking by the later arcs. There's some great characters like Cecil, Battle Beast, and Thrag, and the story consistently tries to throw curveballs and keep you interested. All good stuff. But I can't ignore the comic's flaws. It leans on shock value a little too often, some character decisions feel forced, and Mark's development can be all over the place. Which brings us back to the question that started this whole 3-part review. Is Invincible's success warranted? I would say that if the comic hadn't been written by The Walking Dead guy, it probably wouldn't have been as talked about. An indie darling with a dedicated following, similar to something like Saga, but not the international mega hit it is today. So yeah, at least partially it's due to Robert Kirkman having some prestige. But while Kirkman's name is 100% the reason this is now a multimedia franchise, The popularity of the comic itself is well earned. The term epic is basically meaningless now, but Invincible genuinely earns it. This starts as a totally average superhero comic about some dork getting superpowers, and it ends with us 500 years into the future seeing that very same dork as the leader of an intergalactic empire. Like with the previously mentioned DBZ, one of Invincible's greatest strengths is its willingness to evolve and change over time. Dozens of plot lines, dozens of characters, many with distinct origins and vibes. This truly feels like a fully fleshed out world, and the fact you can experience it all by just reading one book is incredible. So is it worth reading? Yeah, absolutely. You're not really gonna have a hard time collecting it. Probably the best way is to get the compendiums. There are these massive books collecting not only all of the main title, but all the spin-offs as well, so you're not gonna miss literally any plot-relevant information. If you don't like over-the-top violence, steer clear of Invincible. But if you like superhero comics, Dragon Ball Z, and want a story that plays around with the tropes while also delivering a compelling narrative, this is right up your alley. At the end of the day, I can't call Invincible a perfect comic, but I can call it one of the most memorable I've ever read. And that means a hell of a lot. Anyway, those are my thoughts. What do you think of Invincible? Do you like the final act of the story? Let me know in the comments. As usual, if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. I'll be taking a short break, but if you want more reviews, feel free to look over on the community tab of my YouTube channel. I'm currently posting weekly text reviews of Daredevil Born Again. Check them out. And thank you for watching.